Hello again and welcome back to the shop. I recently got asked by a buddy of mine if I would be willing to turn a noodle cutter for his mother. Now I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what a noodle cutter was or that they even existed. But evidently, when you make homemade noodles, you roll your dough out and then you have a device that looks similar to a rolling pin with some little discs on it, and you roll it through the dough and it cuts nice uniform noodles. I did a little searching around on Google, found a couple of photos of other noodle cutters, and took a shot at it. I used a piece of hard maple, and I went ahead, trued it up, and that's where I started this video. So let me take you on a little trip and show you how I made a noodle cutter for my good friend. I trued up this piece of maple, and I'd already drawn some lines on it, just trying to get an idea for dimensions. But what you'll notice is it's thinner down here, and it gets fatter as it goes toward the tailstock. And what I need to do is make a couple of final passes to make sure that this center section is the same diameter all the way down the blank. I don't know if this will work. I don't have to take much wood off, but I've taken and set a stop block on my gouge, and I'm hoping to run that along the back of the tool rest and be able to take this right down to the proper dimensions. So let's see if that works. Not too bad, but you'll notice the lines are still here. I need to take the tool rest in just a hair so that I'm making contact at this end of the blank, and I think this is going to do a nice job for me. So let's just take the tool rest in just a hair. There we go. I've taken my calipers and set them to the dimension of the blank, and as you can see, I could pull them right down the blank, and I've made good contact, and it looks like the blank is probably about as close as I'm going to get it to being the same diameter from headstock to tailstock. Now that I've got my blank to the diameter that I want, I've come in and I have started at the center, and I put a line every half of an inch, and there are 14 lines. So I'm going to come back with my parting tool now, and I'm going to cut a section out of the center of each one of these, and I'm going to make sure that that section is the same diameter all the way down, and then we'll come back with another tool and we'll start to form the points that will actually cut the pasta. I plan to go ahead and continue what I'm doing all the way down the blank. I'm not going to make you watch that, but the area in between the two discs is 1 inch. So I'm going to have a nice 1-inch dowel up the middle. So I'll come back when I've got all of these cut, and then we'll work on shaping these discs. I've got all of my discs cut. I'm happy with how they look. The inside diameter of the dowel is about 1 inch. You'll notice I do have the markings here for a disc on either end, but I'm not going to go that far out. I'm going to go ahead and take this down a little bit and then start forming the handles. I want to have a nice decent sized handle to be able to get a hold of and put a little pressure on to be able to push through the dough to cut the noodles. I think the first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to sand down inside of each of these discs before I start to put the sharp edge on them, because I don't want my hands near those edges when the lathe is spinning and they have a point on them. So I'm going to do a little sanding off camera. You're not going to have to watch that. I probably will take a stick, wrap the paper around it, stick it down in here, and just clean all these up. I'm going to try to take them down to about 400 so they're ready to roll. And I'll come back when that's done and before I do anything else. I've completed all of the sanding between the discs. And what I want to do now is bring a detail gouge in here and put some some points on the end of each of these discs. And I want to be really careful because since I got all of the discs to the same diameter, I don't want to take any meat away. I need them all to touch the countertop at the same time so that they cut evenly all the way through the dough for the noodles. Well, I had a tiny catch and busted a chunk of one of my discs off. I'm trying to look and find out how I did it, and I must have just caught it right to do that because this maple's pretty hard. What I'm going to do is get some wood glue, get this glued back on. We're going to give it overnight to dry, and then we'll come back and pick up where we left off and see if we can't make the rest of our cutters. I've been working on each one of these little cutters and just kind of giving them a nice little point. I haven't been doing it on camera. It's pretty repetitive. I'll go ahead and show the last three. And then what I figured I would do is once I got them all cut, I take a ruler and lay them across them to make sure they're all the same height. And I'll make any adjustments to those that aren't. Now what I want to do is just see which ones are a little low, and looks like this one here I really went low on that one. I don't know how you can see it on the camera, but there's probably, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch gap below the next two. The rest of them are pretty darn close. So what that means is I'm going to have to adjust each of these down just a fraction to get them all level. So I'm going to turn the camera off and just basically continue to do what I did just to take each of these down to the level of this one. I've worked all of my cutters down and I feel very confident that they're all extremely close in size. I got my calipers out and tested them, so I'm real happy with that. Now what I want to do is I need to take the two handles down. These handles must be just a hair smaller than the cutters, otherwise the cutters won't be able to make contact with the table as they roll through the dough to cut the noodles. So I'm going to take these down to the proper diameter and then I'll start forming the handles. I've turned the handle down and my cutter has kind of a point on it, and then it has a flat inside, and where it starts to flatten out is equivalent to the diameter of my handle. So I'm happy with that. I'll go ahead and get the other handle turned to this same diameter, and then I'll come back and begin shaping the handles. Got my handles turned down to the proper size, and I've gone ahead and marked the ends. Each handle is about 3 inches long. What I'm going to do now is just shape them and give them a nice curved effect on the end. And we'll probably taper it down right here just behind the front cutter, and that should just about do it. That's about as far down as I want to take this. I need it to stay attached to the lathe for sanding. What I do think I'm going to do is, if you take a look at, I don't know how well you can see that, but my ruler hits the point of each of the cutters. So I feel pretty good about the cutters being able to roll on the table and cut the noodles. The only thing I'm a little unsure of is the thickness of my cutters. I may want to go in and take a few of these down a tiny bit. I'm going to just kind of look them over closely and then make a decision on each one individually. Once I'm done with that, it's just going to be a bunch of sanding. I'm not going to film the sanding because it's just going to be a long, boring process. Once I'm done sanding it, I will come back, show it to you, and then we'll get a nice finish put on it. I've got it sanded through 400 grit. I think it looks pretty good and it feels really nice. I need to now get it separated from the lathe. It's still on there a little bit, so I'm going to take it over to my table and so I can lay it down and carefully cut the rest of that off. I don't want to tear it off because it will cause a little bit of tear out in the end of my handle, and I don't want that. There we go. Not too bad. That looks pretty good. Now let me get the other end separated. I've got a little bit of a nub left on that one, but I'm going to take this over to my disc sander and I'll clean these ends up. The finish from my sander wasn't quite as nice as I would like. It was fairly aggressive, so it's time for some hand sanding. This end's a little better, but you can still see it's a little rough. So I'm going to grab my lathe sandpaper and just basically clean this up by hand. I really like how this is turning out. I've got the ends sanded. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean this with a little denatured alcohol. And then I'm going to let it sit overnight so I can make sure 100% of the alcohol has evaporated from it before I put any oil on it. I've allowed my noodle cutter to dry overnight, and I'm sure that all the denatured alcohol has fully evaporated. What I'm going to do now is apply a little finish, and I'm going to be using some butcher block oil. And this is basically 100% food grade mineral oil, so nothing fancy here. I'm just going to put some on a rag and apply it right to the noodle cutter. All right, I'm pretty happy with that first coat. I don't know how many more coats I'll do. Like I said, it's dependent upon the rate of absorption. So I'm just going to let it sit here and soak, and I'll come back in a little while and check it and see if I can add some more. I came out today and the noodle cutter had totally absorbed all of the mineral oil that I put on it to the point where it looked dry, just like it did yesterday when I first started. So I decided to go to plan B, which was filling this pan with mineral oil, and I'm just going to let it soak. I'll come out periodically and rotate it, and when I think it's been in there long enough, probably tomorrow afternoon, I'll pull it out of the dish and I'll start to dry it off, and I'll just continually dry it until no more oil seeps out of it, and that ought to give me a really nice finish. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I let my noodle cutter set in the food grade mineral oil for about 24-25 hours. I pulled it out and I spent 2 days wiping this blank down because it was weeping mineral oil. However, when I lay it on the counter, we have a granite countertop. It's perfect. Each one of these discs meets perfectly with the countertop. So I think it's going to cut really nice noodles. Haven't tried it yet, but I'm ready to deliver it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd like to thank you for joining me. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon. Have a great evening, everybody.